Welcome everyone to Tales from the 90's, your retro time machine back to my favorite time period, the 1990s. If you've never seen our podcast before, heard it, whatever you're listening to it on, we're on episode number 46. We're going back to October 1991. What I do is I pick a random month and a year from the 90s, and then talk about it in depth, give my own personal memories. But like I said, we're going back to early 1990s, going back to October 1991. Let's go. Yeah, this is definitely a special episode. One I was not really dreading to talk about, but I knew it would come up eventually, and it's kind of one important thing to talk about. You'll find out what that's about in a little bit. This is our third trip going through 1991. I've done 2 months prior, and you can catch all those on here. Whether you're catching this on Facebook, YouTube, or Spotify, that's the 3 places you can find it for now. I don't know if I'm going to put it in any other places or not, but been getting a lot of views the last couple weeks, so I'm really excited about that. Not making any money off this thing, just having fun with it. Excited to get my point of view out, and because everybody's got their own points of views about things that went on. There's facts that I go through those, but there's also your own opinions on something. Just like say for instance, like Seinfeld and Friends, 2 of the most popular series from the 90s and of all time, that have complete different opinions. Like, I can't stand Friends, but I love Seinfeld, and there's people that feel opposite, and there's people that don't like them at all, people that like both of them. So anyway, that's a little bit about this. This is my perspective. Like I said, third trip through 1991. I was 7 at this time and in 2nd grade. I do want to mention that there's a bonus episode that's getting ready to come out this Friday. It'll be September 19th. And it's all about back to school. I recorded it earlier in the week. It's an hour and a half of me just rambling on about my experiences all throughout school and some of the difference between now and then, and just I'd be thinking about talking about something, and then something else would pop up in my head, and next thing I know, I'm done with it. It's an hour and a half. So hope you enjoy that. A lot of it's a lot of personal memory, so if you don't know me, you won't get a lot of the references, but it's still kind of fun to look back at that, just what it was like to go to school then versus 10 years after that and 10 years after that. Just the more time changes, the more things change, but some things don't change. But anyway, check that out. Like I said, this one comes out Wednesday. That one the bonus one comes out Friday, and just like I said, check that out. Right now though, I'm going to get back into my time machine, go back to October of 1991, and going to be talking about all kinds of different things. We're going to start on TV this week, and a couple big things happen. One is definitely a sad thing. Red Fox, comedic genius in my opinion, passed away. He suffered a fatal heart attack while he was on the set of his sitcom that he just started filming called The Royal Family. And it was kind of his show where he was getting back on TV. He hadn't really done anything of note since the Sanford and Son. One of my dad, my grandpa's favorite shows. I got into it, and that thing is hilarious. But if you remember Sanford and Son, you remember the bit he did all the time, where anything happens, whether he's having trouble with something, or health issues, or something happens he don't like, he could clutch his chest like, and Elizabeth, I'm coming to join you. His dead wife, he'd always think or pretend or both that he's having a heart attack. Well, the sad thing, he actually did that like on the set of other stuff he did, including this show. But the sad thing is that is actually how he died. He literally grabbed his chest and fell over, and his cast members for the show thought that he was just doing the bit from Sanford and Son. They didn't realize, until, he wasn't moving, that he actually suffered a fatal heart attack. And I think he either died on the way to the hospital or at the hospital. But definitely a sad time. I wasn't watching Sanford and Son then. I didn't get into that till early 2000s, watching with my dad and my grandpa. And, man, they don't make them like that. Same vein as the Jeffersons or All in the Family. There's definitely racial undertones to the main characters, just like Archie and All in the Family. Like I said, George Jefferson and the Jeffersons, and then Fred Sanford and Sanford and Son. But it shows how stupid they are, but at the same time, you can't help but laugh at it. And, like I said, that and All in the Family. Jeffersons, too. But I find the Sanford and Son funnier than the Jeffersons, even though the Jeffersons came from All in the Family. It was literally spun off from it. I still, Fred Sanford, he was just, he went even farther than George Jefferson did as far as, like, the people he hated, and it was just, that show was hilarious. And, Red Fox had been a comedian for years, and just, the world lost a comedic genius that day. One other thing of note in TV is on October 29th, Turner Broadcasting System, which of course owned TBS and TNT, Ted Turner, and of course me being a huge wrestling fan, owned WCW. They purchased the Hanna-Barbera library for about $320 million, which of course includes all those classic ones like Scooby-Doo and the Flintstones and just all those. And they would actually, Cartoon Network would launch the following year, on the backbone of all those cartoons. I don't know if the idea for Cartoon Network was already there and they purchased that to become part of it, or if the opportunity came up to purchase it and they did, and they spun, like, we need to put this on, we can't put it on TBS and TNT. They did during the day, because I remember watching on TBS Flintstones in the morning. But, like I said, they had to have their own channel for that, and of course, out of that came the Cartoon Network. I wasn't the biggest fan of Cartoon Network, I'll admit. I know people are like, what? I was more Nickelodeon guy. That's why I give the Nickelodeon lineup on here instead of the Cartoon Network lineup, because more often than not, I didn't really like the things on Cartoon Network. It just wasn't my style of things. Other than reruns of Scooby-Doo and Flintstones and the Jetsons and those older Hanna-Barbera cartoons, I didn't really like the newer stuff. I like Johnny Quest. I don't know if that was Hanna-Barbera, but I know that was an older one too, but I didn't like the Space Ghost from Coast to Coast, and I can't remember the dorky looking kid and the Dexter, I think. Dexter's Laboratory, I think. I tried, but I really couldn't get into any of that stuff. Sorry, don't shoot me. But a couple movies that came out this month that were definitely childhood favorites and still favorites of mine. I own them both on DVD. One is Suburban Commando, the Hulk Hogan movie. Most of the people know, when you're thinking of Hulk Hogan's 90s kids movies, you're thinking either Three Ninjas, I think at High Mountain, where Hogan's like wearing a wig or a hairpiece or whatever it is, or most likely you're thinking of Mr. Nanny, where the scene where he's dressed as a ballerina and dancing. But my favorite was always Suburban Commando. It's just so outlandish. Hogan played this just just commando guy that was like, basically a bounty hunter, and he was going after this main bad guy. I can't remember his name right now, but he's like the general of the evil army or whatever they are in space, wherever planet and solar system these things are from. So he was an alien, but anyway, he had to go to Earth to recharge after fighting that guy and not killing him. The guy got away, but he goes to Earth to recharge, and then he goes to live with this family, and they get involved, and it's hilarious. My favorite part of it though is it has, I believe it's Brutus Beefcake, which of course is Hogan's buddy, and The Undertaker, which is actually Mark Calloway, obviously. I'm not saying, oh, his actual real name, like everybody probably knows that if you know wrestling. But this was actually before he was Undertaker. It was right after he'd left WCW, but in between when he went to the WWF as Undertaker. So in between Mean Mark Callis and The Undertaker. But anyway, they come up to they're like the evil bounty hunters that are after him. and Undertaker comes up through the toilet. It has a toilet seat around his head, and then when they talk, it's like this. They have baby voices. Like, that movie's hilarious. I love it. I don't care how cheesy or dorky it is. And another one that was cheesy, but most people have an even fonder memory than Suburban Commando, is Ernest Scared Stupid. Of course, October. You know some Halloween movies are going to come out. I'll stay tuned later in this for my top 5 horror movies that came out in '91. I usually do that when I talk about, when I do an October month from the 90s. I usually give my top, whatever that happens to be. There happen to be 5 that I liked. There's other horror movies that came out, not just 5, but these are the 5 that I liked, and I just ranked them. But this is one of them. And it doesn't rank like near the top, only because it's not like horror like a Freddy, Jason, Leprechaun, that type of thing. But Ernest Scared Stupid, that movie is hilarious, of course, being Ernest. And of course, there's some scary stuff to it, like to little kids, the trolls on that thing, especially the main troll, was it Tantor or Trantor? Can't remember his name, its name, whatever it is. But that thing was like, to little kids, that thing was scary. But yeah, the Ernest, just being Jim Varney, talk about comedic genius. On the other spectrum, most people think of Jim Varney, and obviously you think of Ernest, but you think of like, oh, it didn't take nothing to play that. Trust me, if you've ever seen some of his stuff, like look him up on YouTube. Some of his stand-up stuff, and his like they show him acting like doing like a Hamlet or one of those Shakespeare type of plays. Like, he can actually act. He's not just some hillbilly that they found for commercials and then ended up in movies like a lot of people think he was. He was a seriously trained actor, and for better or for worse got typecast of this. But there were stories that even when he had cancer and was dying, he would go to the hospital and visit the sick kids that also had cancer, and play the Ernest character for nothing. And there wasn't no publicity. There was no payment for it. It was just him giving back, and that was the type of person he was. And just like I cannot say enough good things about Jim Varney. I could have a whole podcast, and maybe someday I will. I've actually got done some watch. Hey Vern, it's my family album, his first like TV special where he plays different characters in his family. I got like 2 more of those left to come out, because I recorded them forever ago, and just like in between all these videos, it's like it's hard to get everything put out without just, I don't know, but long way to say I've been busy with all kinds of videos and life and everything else. But anyway, yeah, I definitely could make a whole video about, maybe I will, maybe I'll do that sometime next year as a bonus episode, rank my favorite Ernest movies and talk about them, and it's just so much great stuff there. But yeah, that was the 2 movies that came out that month that I really liked. Speaking of movies, the next thing I'm going to talk about is books. And I say that because the Stephen King book that came out in October, it was Needful Things, and a lot of people have seen the movie. I've seen the movie a few times, and I've read the book once, so I'm not like, and it's been forever ago, so it's not like I can sit here and say, well, this happened in the book, but this, and this happened in the movie, and all the difference. So I can't really say with certainty how faithful it followed the book, the movie did. But I know the book was really good. It's and I believe I've talked about the movie on the podcast before in one of the months when the movie came out. But the basic premise of it is this guy moved to town. Sort of reminds me of the guy that moved to town in Salem's Lot that had the vampire. But this guy is like, they don't say he's the devil, and I'm not sure if he is, but he's definitely one of the people working for him, or Stephen King's version of the devil. The Crimson King, Flag. Just it's hard to tell who's actually like running the evil side of things in the Stephen King's universe. By the way, if my hair pops up, it's been messing with me all day. Anyway, he moves to town and opens this like antique shop, and he's got all this stuff that people in this town can't afford. But what he'll do is he'll trade it to them if they do. Like, this kid wanted this baseball that was signed. Can't remember who signed, if it was one of the Yankees or the Dodgers. Sorry, I can't remember. But had something in my throat. It was it was a signed baseball. It might have been Mickey Mantle, I think. If I'm wrong, sorry. But in order to do that, he had to go and I think he had to like tear something up or mess. Anyway, they would he would make people go up and mess this up at this guy's house, or go tell this rumor or tell this person this happened, and the whole town ends up with fighting each other over everything that's happening because they think, they're blaming each other, and meanwhile this guy's, whatever the chaos is that's caused by it. Someone calling me from Iowa at 9 o'clock at night. I don't know anybody in Iowa. I'll let the voicemail get that one. Hopefully it's the wrong number there. But anyway, yeah, like I said, just like he feeds off this chaos, and the whole town, like, fights each other until they finally, the Sheriff Pangborn, which of course has been a character in other Stephen King books, he finally, like, gets the town, what's left of him, to finally go against this guy, and he just moves away, and you're led to believe he's going to the next one. But yeah, like I said, I don't remember a ton about it because it's been forever, but I know it was a good book, and I know it was a good movie, so you can't go wrong with either. And like I said, I can't remember the differences. But we'll see if the Iowa call left me a voicemail here. If they are, they're still leaving it. But something I want to talk about now is what I was alluding to earlier, that I knew I'd be talking about eventually. But October of 1991 is the year that my grandma passed away. My dad's mom. The first grandparent I had that passed away. Not counting great-grandparents. I believe her dad passed away in 1986. So it would have been my great-grandpa on my, on my dad's side, but my grandma, from my grandma. But, so it said he died in 86, so I would have been, at that time I would have been 2.5, so I don't remember him. And then her mom, my grandma's mom, which would be my great-grandma, she actually passed away, like, a couple months before I was born. And I believe my dad's dad, which would be my great-grandpa, I believe he passed away maybe 6 or 7 months after I was born. So that time period between my grandma's mom dying and my grandpa's dad dying, I'm sure that had to have been a very sad time for them. But they had still had time, to welcome me into the family, whether they wanted to or not. No, but yeah, my grandma was born Laura. I can't even speak already. Not Laura. Lois Jane Campbell Cohen. Campbell is her maiden name. She was born June 19th of 1927. So that means that, and she would have been 98 this year. It's hard to think. And then she died on October 2nd of 1991 at 64 years old. I wasn't there when she died. This was the time I was living with my mom. I believe we were living with my mom's mom, who I called Granny. I called her Grandma Lois, but I would call her Granny. Or sometimes Granny Willow May, which Willow May was her name, but normally it was just Granny. I don't remember saying her first name too many times. But yeah, she died in Price Hill, where the house that I wasn't literally born in the house, but where I was brought home from, basically. So I guess you could consider that being born in the house. But yeah, she died there, and I have a ton of memories about her. Not as many as my other grandparents, because she was the first of my 4 grandparents to die. But one of the biggest memories I have of her is she loved playing the Nintendo. Especially Super Mario Brothers 2. It's where I got my love for that at. Let me make sure I ain't got a stupid... Okay. I got a call from someone at that time of night from Iowa. It's like, what the heck is going on? Anyway, sorry, that has nothing to do with this. Get back focused here, idiot. She probably smacked me for calling myself an idiot. Yeah, she would... well, I'll get back to what I was talking about, then I'll get into that. But yeah, she loved playing the Mario games. And I believe she loved Legend of Zelda as well, and probably some other ones. But I remember her playing mostly Super Mario Brothers 2. That was where I fell in love with that game. It's probably why I prefer that over like all the other Marios, even though obviously the first Mario is a classic. The third one is too. And because I've talked about it before, the story of why Mario 2 is so different, how it was originally another game that they... put the Mario characters into because the game they came up with for Mario 2 in Japan was deemed to be too difficult for Americans. And I played the game, and it is pretty difficult. But out of that came this game, and just like, there was, Mario, Luigi, Toad, and Princess Daisy. And, they all had their different skills. Mario was more balanced. Luigi could jump farther. The princess could, like, jump and, like, float. And then, I can't remember what Toad was good at, but I can't remember what it was. But they all had their own different powers, and that was what made it different. Anyway, she would play this game all the time. I would sit there and watch her play it. She would let me sit on her lap and try to play it, and of course, as a kid, you suck at it. I can't remember what year that came out, but I know she had it early. But I know, one of my last memories of being there of her was I would sneak up at like 5 or 6 in the morning, whatever it was, to play this, because I knew, like, around 8 o'clock, 8:30, whenever my grandma would get up, she would be on that thing, and I wouldn't get a chance to play it. So I would sneak up and play it, and she probably knew what was going on, because obviously she had to. She would have seen the save slot and stuff like that. Games were different then. But she never said anything like, "What are you doing?" She knew what I was doing, and probably enjoyed having another person in the family that played video games, because my Grandpa Wally didn't play video games. He was obsessed with his video camera, which I got my love of that from him too. I'm talking to one right now. But yeah, he recorded me on everything. But yeah, she was definitely the tougher of the two grandparents. The more strict. Just like, it's weird. My two sets of grandparents, my grandpa on my dad's side and my granny on my mom's side, were always the nicer ones, the ones that give you more treats, and were not as strict on you. My dad's mom, Grandma Lois, and my mom's dad, Papa Jesse, they were the strict ones. I remember many times getting yelled at by Grandma Lois, and her yelling at other people, and she wasn't mean. She just, she was strict. One of them was, and one of them wasn't. The same. It was weird how the genders were swapped as far as like which one was strict and which one wasn't on both sides. But yeah, I remember that. And a fun fact about me that I don't ever talk about, because I don't try to like brag about it or have no way to prove it or anything. But I am technically related to Dolly Parton somehow, because my grandma was like a distant cousin, or I don't know if it was by marriage, or I don't know. There was I remember hearing that, and my dad always made up stories, but this wasn't one of the made up stories. This was, the whole family was saying this, that she was related to Dolly Parton. So I always found that pretty cool. But like I said, I never go around saying like, oh, I'm related to Dolly Parton, because I couldn't tell anybody how, or nobody would believe me anyway. And it's not like I'm gonna get she sends me money each month. The only interaction I've had with Dolly Parton is the kids' books, the Dolly Parton, is it Imagination? The thing where she, her foundation gives out books once a month. The kids got those my kids got those when they were little. That's my only interaction with the Dolly Parton, and it's not really interactions. But anyway, yeah, sadly she died on October 2nd, 1991, and like I said, I wasn't living there at the time, so I wasn't there when she died. Probably would have scarred me, especially as a little kid. I was, scared of that type of thing. It was hard enough going to the funeral, but I remember the funeral home very well. It was Radels, I believe it was pronounced Radels, there in Price Hill, which was recently demolished, a year or so ago. I was part of this, I joined this page for Price Hill, or that neighborhood where I used to live, and they were trying to save it, get it marked as a historical site, which it should have been. Things that aren't worth anything have been marked historical sites before. This certainly was one. My grandma had her funeral there. My Uncle Dan, which I'll talk about at another time on another video for the month that he died, he had his funeral there. I'm not sure if my Grandpa Wally did. I was never informed of when he died, and that's a whole other story I'll talk about some other time. Try not to make any kind of negative stuff out of this, because really wanted to be a tribute to my Grandma Lois. Yeah, I remember that funeral very well for a couple reasons. I had a cousin that's from my grandma's. I guess it would be her. That would be her great grandson, I believe, because she had another daughter that I believe she had with somebody before she got with my grandpa Wally, and she'd had a daughter and she had a son. So yeah, he was technically my cousin, but he was, I guess a generation above or something. However that goes. Anyway, I remember he was there, and other family members, but obviously I can't remember who. Obviously my dad and my uncles were there and my grandpa, but I just remember being there all day, and at night going outside, and because it was it's only so much you can be in a room with somebody that's dead as a kid before you start freaking out. Even though I wasn't expecting her to come back from the dead or nothing like that, even though I watched all those movies, but it's just only so much of that you can take as a kid. And we were there all day because my grandpa planned the funeral on my dad's, so we were there all day. But it was a very sad time. I believe she was the first ever person I'd seen dead. Obviously they had the viewing there that night, and I just stuff like that. I can still see her laying there, which is strange, but it don't scare me or anything. And I mean it upsets me, but then again, how long ago was this? 11, 20. Man, 34 years ago. It's still 34 years past. It's not as fresh in your mind, but I can still see her laying there. But another thing I remember is they'd have like the radio on back in like the I always call it the death party, the room where they have the food. I know that seems kind of crude, but I always call that the death party, where they have the food. Especially if you go to afterward funeral, if you go to somebody's house to eat and stuff, and everybody gathers, I call it the death party. But anyway, they had the radio going, probably B105, our country station, and a song had just come out that month by Colin Ray called "Love Me." And if you've ever heard that song, you'll realize how on point. I believe that was the first time I'd ever soaked in lyrics of a song. I mean, I know all the songs, especially Alabama songs, Mountain Music, Tennessee River. You know the words and everything. But this is the first time I'd ever heard it. I'd heard that song at all, and the first time I ever remember sitting and listening and the words and the meanings. Because if you don't know that song, it's about a guy that's talking about to his grandpa, and his grandpa's reminiscing about his grandma, about how they met and everything like that. Well, towards the end of it, you find out that they're actually going, the grandson and the grandpa are going into the funeral because the grandma had just died, and that just hit me with obviously with a freaking ton of bricks. So that song always has a special place in my heart. I believe I talked about it on that song on the podcast before. I alluded to this, but I didn't give the full story because I wanted to keep it for this. I think the thing is when that song went to #1. But yeah, the song had just come out, and because I had to look that up to find out if that was true or if how you can have memories and you oh yeah, I remember that was this time, and you find out the song was at 3 years earlier. No, it literally came out this month. But yeah, like I said, I don't have 50,000 tons of memories of Grandma Lois. Thankfully, I have a couple of my grandpa's VHS tapes that I'm slowly putting onto YouTube. I'm almost done with it, sadly. I wish there was more. He had a ton more, but, various family members over the years took them and everything else. Like I said, not trying to get negative on here. But I wish I had more of those to see. It would be awesome. But yeah, that was Grandma Lois. She loved... another memory I have of her... that I hold special is my love of Billy Joe Royal. Not as well known, but he was a country singer, and in the 60s he was the 60s rock singers. Not I guess it is rock. I don't know exactly what you'd consider. It's oldies now. You consider it oldies now. Anyway, probably his most famous song was "Down in the Boondocks." I think everybody's heard that song. But that was my favorite song as a little kid, besides Alabama stuff. that my grandpa and my dad got me listening to. My grandma was more into the oldies stuff, and she was always listening to that, and she had the record for Down in the Boondocks, and of course I wore that out because I love that song. That and Cherry Hill Park, those were his two big songs. But the oldies station, I think it was WYGY in Cincinnati. My grandma would call them all the time, and she would ask them to play Billy Joe Royal Down in the Boondocks for me, and they would, if you remember doing requests on radios for my generation, I don't even know if they still do that anymore, but it was such a thrill to hear, because sometimes, I wouldn't be there. Sometimes I would be at my house, and my mom would, or at my grandma or granny's house, because that's where we were living, I believe it, the last couple of years of my Grandma Lois's life. But yeah, she would call over there and turn the oldie station on, and they turn it on, and next is Billy Joe Royal, Down in the Boondocks. This one's for Jason from Grandma Lois, and I would just my face would light up, and the greatest thing in the world. I feel like some kind of celebrity. They said my name on the radio because they said my full name on there. But stuff like that, the memories you hope you always keep in your head. That's one of my main reasons doing this podcast is, someday you can't remember these things. I've got them on tape. I got them on tape here. I'm old. You can tell I'm old. But yeah, that's a little bit about my Grandma Lois. I wish I would have had more time with her. I was 7 years old when she passed away. I wish I could have had more time with her. I know it hit my grandpa Wally hard, and of course my dad, my uncles, and my aunt. But yeah, I knew I'd have to talk about my grandparents passing away, and my Uncle Dan passing away at some point, and no reason to hide it or anything. And I know most people watching this I don't know your grandma. Well, you don't have to know her, but maybe it'll make you think of your grandma and the great memories you might have had with her. Hope it don't make you too sad. Yeah, when you lose someone that long ago, you got equal parts sadness, but also just the happy stuff just comes back to you. And if I think of anything else about her as I'm doing the rest of this podcast, which I'm sorry, it's a half hour into it already, I'll just talk about it then. I have a little thing written down, not exactly a script, but talking points. So that's basically, if you see me looking over here talking about the next thing. And I guess fittingly, we'll talk about video games next, because I don't believe she had one of these, but the Super Nintendo was out at this time. And the best-selling video games, one for Sega Genesis was, of course, Sonic the Hedgehog. And for Super Mario World was the best-selling game for Nintendo, which was Super Nintendo, which had just come out a couple months earlier. Like I said, she probably didn't have that, I don't think. But of course, if she could have lived long enough, of course, they came out with the Super Mario World, the Super Mario All Stars plus Super Mario World, the cartridge they came out with. That was amazing. Not only did you get the new Super Mario World game, but you got Super Mario 1, 2, and 3, and what was called the Lost Levels, which was that second Super Mario game that was only released in Japan. And like I said, here it's known as the Lost Levels. But all that on one cartridge, she would have freaked out. And the fact that you could save at certain points, you didn't have to always start over right at the very beginning. Man, she would have loved that. And I think if she would have had a Sega Genesis, I think she would have liked Sonic too. I don't know, it might have been too fast. Sonic was obviously made for the younger crowd, but she might have liked that too. Man, I just trying to think of her if she would have seen the Nintendo 64, the Sega Dreamcast, even the PS4 today. She wouldn't have known we would have never seen her. She would have been even more glued to the thing. I could see her playing a game like Call of Duty or something, and because I remember her cussing a lot. I could see her on a headset cussing people. I really could see that. She was great. But yeah, that's pretty much all I want to talk about with video games. Just that was the time. Sega and Super Nintendo just came out, and the war between those two was on, and man, that's great days of video games. Even today, I don't think today can compare. You really can. between, there's competition obviously between, the Switch 2, now it is the Switch 2, the newest Xbox and the newest PlayStation. But back then it was so cutthroat. They were openly saying commercials, Sega was saying Nintendo sucks, and Sega or Nintendo was giving it back to them. But I talk a little bit about wrestling now. Of course I'm obsessed with wrestling. A couple of shows they had on October 3rd. They had Battle Royal at Royal Albert Hall in London, England. It was the first event of their first ever European tour. I believe they've done like a couple shows over there, but this was their first European tour, which is showing how big their company was getting by then. And like I said, this is the very first show of that tour. On this night, Ric Flair defeated Tito Santana, and the British Bulldog, naturally, won the 20-man over-the-top Battle Royal in the main event. He had last eliminated Typhoon. But, of course, they're going to have British Bulldog, be big there. And, of course, the next year, they would be back over there for SummerSlam in '92, Wembley Stadium. British Bulldog would defeat Bret Hart for the Intercontinental title. But, yeah, this was the very first European tour. Now they freaking tour everywhere. I'm not going to try to get too negative or talk about today's stuff too much, but they just announced that they're having WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia, and it absolutely freaking sucks. I can't believe... Well, I can believe the way they're running things now, where you're having, $7,000-8,000 for good tickets at these events, and it's like they don't seem to care about families anymore. Like I said, I'm not going to try to get too much into that. I try to stick to this time period, try to keep it nostalgic, keep it fun. But another show that came out this month, of course, being October 27th, they had WCW Halloween Havoc, the annual Halloween Havoc. This one's from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and it was the third one that they'd had. This one featured the horrible Chamber of Horrors match. This match was absolutely crap. It had Sting, El Gigante, however you freaking say it. The big freaking guy that couldn't wrestle. Then it ended up being, why can't I think of his name? Giant Gonzalez in WWF. But him, Sting, and the Steiner brothers defeated Abdullah the Butcher, the Diamond Stud, which was Scott Hall then, before he went to be Razor Ramon, and Cactus Jack and Big, in this like cage match that had like an electric chair in it, and Sting's team won when Cactus Jack accidentally pulled the switch when Abdullah the Butcher was in the electric chair, and accidentally the switch kept falling down, and you could tell he wasn't getting electrocuted. I mean, not that they should have literally electrocuted a guy on TV for real, but the special effects they used, like, it was horrible. Also on this show, that probably wasn't horrible, Brian Pillman defeated Richard Morton, which is, of course, was Ricky Morton, but he was being a heel at this time, and like a business type guy with the York Foundation, if you remember them. It was headed by Alexandria York, more known today as Terry Runnels or Marlena from the WWF. But anyway, Brian Pillman defeated him to win the first ever WCW Light Heavyweight title. That was the end of a tournament. And the Phantom defeated Tom Zink, and the Phantom would reveal himself to be Rick Rude, who had just left WWF. He had a big run there as Intercontinental Champion, that big match against the Ultimate Warrior. The main event of the show was thankfully not that Chamber of Horrors match. That was the first match. They got that out of the way quick. But WCW World Heavyweight Champion Lex Luger defeated Ron Simmons in a 2 out of 3 falls match. And of course, this was before Ron Simmons was a babyface and the first ever African American World Heavyweight Champion. This was like a year or two before that. This is still when Ron Simmons was either part of or just came off of being part of the tag team Doom with Butch Reed. So very much still a heel, I think, unless I'm wrong there, unless I got that backwards, but I believe he was the heel. But keep it kind of in the vein of sports. We're going to move on and talk about sports now. Being October, of course, the end of the baseball season. The Minnesota Twins that year defeated the Atlanta Braves to win the World Series. Took 7 games. It was called one of the greatest World Series of all time because the games were just like so close. You know, each one was like a nail biter, which is, you know, what you want is watching sports. You know, of course you love blowouts, especially if your team's doing the blowing out. But as a fan, if you just want to watch baseball and you're not like a super fan of either one, you know, you'd love to see, you know, go all the way and just be so close that you don't know who's going to win. But it was our third World Series title for the Twins, and the most recent one. They haven't won one since. I know how they feel. I'm a Reds fan, obviously. They haven't won. They won the World Series the year before this in 1990. But this is the first time the World Series was ever made up of teams that both teams, they finished last place the year before, and this year they're in the World Series. It's the first time that's ever happened, and you know, really shows what the draft could do. And now they do everything different now with drafts and stuff, and the free agents, and of course the freaking Dodgers and the Yankees and the Mets can always afford the big name players. So you know, it seems like they're always right there, you know, winning the freaking series after series because they can afford the players. Unfortunately, seems to be the way it is. But Pirates and the Blue Jays were the other two teams that made up the playoffs, and this was the time when they had only 4 teams make the playoffs, 2 from each league. Back when it was Western and Eastern divisions, we were in the not football, the NL West, which is just hilarious because you take a map and you pick, you know, Ohio is easily, if you're going to divide it in east to west down the middle, Ohio is easily on the east, but because of the way everything was seeded and everything, we ended up in the NL West. Anyway, we finished 5th in that, 20 games back. We had a losing record, so the year after the World Series is kind of disappointing there. You know, you at least want to make the playoffs the year after you win the World Series. But we wouldn't get back to the playoffs till 1995. Wouldn't win another division title till 2010. Definitely not going to win it this year. If you're watching, I'm recording this in September 2025. Right now we're 2 games behind New York Mets for the 3rd wild card spot. Shows you how different it is now. Like 7, literally, I think it's 7 teams make up the playoffs for each. So 14 teams make up the playoffs when they had 4 then. And I actually prefer the way it is now. I like more teams. You get more games. Although I hate how baseball ends in November now. It just feels weird, baseball being in November. Like, it should end in October. But something that should be continuing into November, nice segue there, the NFL. At this time, they had, at the end of this month, October of 91, they finished week number 9. The leaders for the AFC were the Bills, the Oilers, if you remember them, the Houston Oilers, which are now the Tennessee Titans, and the Broncos. The NFC leaders were the Redskins, the Bears, the Lions, and the Saints. And the Redskins were actually undefeated at 8-0. I believe they only lost 2 or 3 games that year. And, of course, they went on to beat the Bills for the Super Bowl. The Bengals at this time were winless. And I think we went on to win 2 or 3 games, finishing last. And then NASCAR was in the second last month of the year. Jeff Bodine won the Mellow Yellow 500 at Charlotte Motor Speedway, and Davey Allison won the AC Delco 500 at Rockingham. And then, of course, next month they had, you know, decided the champion based on points, and championship went to Dale Earnhardt for his 5th championship. He ended up winning 7 of those. But talk a little bit about music now. I was obviously a country music fan, but I do give the Billboard Hot 100 charts just, you know, as a point of reference for people that like that type of music. I was not listening to pop, rock, or anything outside of country music or like oldies my grandpa and grandma listened to. But anyway, the number 1 song for Billboard Hot 100 for a week was Good Vibrations by Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch. Definitely don't know anything about them. I don't know if that was like Good Vibrations song from I believe it was the Beach Boys. I don't know if that's the same song. Was this because I believe Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch were rappers, or one of them was. It shows you how little I know. But the other song that went to number 1 for 3 weeks was Emotions by Mariah Carey. At least I know who she is and her type of music. And we ain't. I've already seen the memes. She's already thawing out now, getting ready for Christmas for her song. But American Country Countdown, some great songs that were number ones that I love from country. Where Are You Now by Clint Black. Spent 1 week at number one. And also back in September it was number one. So it spent 2 weeks total at the top of the charts. Great song. And then Keep It Between the Lines, Ricky Van Shelton, number one for 2 weeks. That's a great song. It's about a single father. His wife died. First he talks about his dad teaching him how to drive, and then later on he's helping his son. His dad tells him to keep it between the lines, the road basically. But it's also obviously a metaphor of keep your life between the lines. And then later on he's helping his son color, and his son's teaching him to color between the lines. And at the end he's praying, he's talking to God. How am I going to raise him? With his mom gone, and the words come back to him from his dad from so long ago. Keep it between the lines. Just I love music like that really just get you thinking. And number one for 1 week at the end of October and 1 week into November for 2 weeks total was Travis Tritt, Anymore. That song, I love that song. First of all, the video, if you ever seen that, part of the Travis Tritt trilogy where I actually seen Travis Tritt twice in concert, and he's talked about the video series he did like extensively, both concerts, for 2 different songs. But the very first one of those was Anymore, and he played a war veteran that his legs were, I can't remember if he was like missing his legs or if they just didn't work. I can't remember if they exactly what it was, but I know he was in a wheelchair. And at first he didn't want to see his girlfriend, or I think it was his girlfriend, might have been his wife at the time. Yeah, it was his wife. Yeah, I remember from the video. He didn't want to see her because he's now in a wheelchair. He had just got back from Vietnam. He didn't want anything to do with her. Didn't want her to see him like that. But and that's not even it's kind of the message of the song, but not really. If you listen to the song opposite the video, without the video, it reads a little bit like someone that's lost who they're with and they're trying to get them back. The video puts a different spin on it. Anyway, that's a trilogy of videos, and it started with that one, and just my dad loved that too. He loved Travis Tritt. I did too, for sure. I've seen him twice in concert, and I actually won a singing competition, Singing Anymore. So it's kind of like a full circle moment there, which is really cool. But albums that were released this month, there was a couple good ones. Reba McEntire's For My Broken Heart. It was her 17th studio album, and the first since her band died. And if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, tragically her band, almost all of her band died in a tragic plane crash. That she decided to take a different plane or something. I can't remember exactly, but she wasn't on the plane, obviously. But yeah, I mean, she had to start, she had to get a new band, obviously, but also try to heal from that, because people she's been on the road with forever, just all of a sudden, a whole bunch of them are dead. It's like, I don't even know how you grieve that. I miss this person, I miss this, I never lost multiple people like that, so I don't, and hopefully I never will. But I don't know how you grieve in a situation when more than one person goes at a time. But to her credit, she was able to launch pretty much a comeback and pick right back up where she was. But this is a great album. Went 4 times platinum and had 4 singles released. The title track, For My Broken Heart, it went to number 1. Is There Life Out There? That went to number 1. And that was a special song to my mom, because it was during this time that video had come out, and it was almost like a mini movie in there, where it's about a woman that decides to go back to college, and she loves her husband and the kids and everything, but she wants to see what else is out there for her, and she wants to go back to college and see if she can do it. And it was really that song that motivated my mom to go to, I think it was Southern Ohio or Southeast Ohio college. I can't remember. It's been forever. But anyway, she went back to college. It was after this come out, and that was one of the things that really drove her to do that. So, and I've heard that story from other people too, that that made them, especially older mothers, that you wouldn't think would they'd think that they're past when you can go back to college, but inspired a lot of people with that one. No wonder it went to number 1. The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia only went to number 12, but that's definitely a memorable one. It was originally released by Vicki Lawrence, and yes, that Vicki Lawrence that played Mama from Mama's Family. I believe during the 60s or 70s she released that. But yeah, that's a classic song about murder, and that video is a whole like movie to itself too. I mean, they used to really do a good job on these videos. The other song that was released was The Greatest Man I Never Knew. That went to number 3. And I remember Grandpa Wally had this CD, and he got it because Grandma Lois had wanted it because she released, Reba had been off for a couple years because of that tragedy, and she was coming back, and Grandma Lois was a big fan of hers, even though she mostly liked oldies. She really loved Reba, just like my mom did. And she was excited about this, and then the album comes out October 1st, and Grandma Lois passed away October 2nd, so she never got to hear the album, but I remember Grandpa Wally specifically getting it for that, and us listening to it together. It was great memories. She, like I said, she died the day after the album came out. But another album that was released was Sammy Kershaw's Don't Go Near the Water. Man, I love freaking Sammy Kershaw and his voice. This is his debut album. It went platinum. The first single released was Cadillac Style. It went to number 3. It's a fun song. It's a really good one. Don't Go Near the Water went to number 12. And I have funny memories of this with my mom. There's a point in this song where he says something, and it sounds just like something that her dad would say, Papa Jesse. He says the line about you have to get the honeysuckle out of your hair, but the way he sings, because Sammy Kershaw's definitely got a distinct voice. He said, "Get the honeysuckle out of your hair," and that's how my grandpa or Papa Jesse talked, and it made my mom laugh every time she heard that part. She loved that song. The last song released from that was Anywhere But Here, went to number 10. But the third song released from that is my favorite Sammy Kershaw song of all time, and one that I did just my own version of, just singing here. It wasn't at karaoke or anything. It was just something I recorded here. That is still my favorite thing that I've ever recorded myself. I've done some weird stuff. I've recorded the Backstreet Boys song, doing all 5 parts. I've done some really good ones. I've got to do a lot of duets because I use that Smule app where you can duet with people. But my favorite thing that I've ever personally recorded was my version of Yard Sale. And that song is so heartbreaking, but the song is so good. And like I said, just something about that, like all the other things I've recorded, I was like, that's off, or that's pitchy, or I'm not in the right key for that. But that one, I did it flawless, I believe, and it's my favorite thing I've ever recorded. Sorry, a little note about me there. No one cares. Sorry, we're about 53 minutes in this. I promise we're almost done. But I do want to talk about the CMA Awards, because they were that month, October, and I don't watch any of the awards stuff today. I don't listen to any of the music today. But, but like I said, I'm not trying to get into any of that. But the CMA Awards, Entertainer of the Year, obviously went to Garth Brooks. He performed Shameless at this show, but A Rope in the Wind had just come out the month before, his third album, which made him into a mega star. And, he was getting ready to, his, This Is Garth Brooks concert special was going to come out, I believe, next year. And, he won Entertainer of the Year, and I believe he won it the next year, and, he's won a ton of those. Definitely deserved it. He is a freaking entertainer, and I'll say a half entertainer and 12 halves. But album of the year went to Garth for No Fences, which based on what just came out. And by the way, I just released my Tales from the Albums special. It's a bonus episode of the podcast, but it's where I take an album and I kind of just talk about it. This is it's only 30 minutes, if you want to check it out, but it's about No Fences. And I plan on just continuing to do that series on just different albums that I love, that has to have at least half the songs, if not more, that I like. It can't just be, the singles. Just Tales from the Albums, not Tales from the Singles. Maybe sometime in the future, I was just thinking last night that I'd really like to do a music reaction / review type thing. Because I would be reacting, I guess I'd be reviewing the songs that I already know. Because, I see a lot of people reacting to country songs for the first time. I would be, obviously probably some of these songs I've heard forever, but maybe pick a random month and a random year throughout country history, no matter what it is, even if it's something new. That would be fun to do. Me listening to, and commenting on new music, boy, I'd be going off. But anyway, take the top 40 countdown and go from 40 to up, in individual ones. I'm not gonna sit there and make 40 songs into one. And I'm only doing the audio, where you can hear it. I'm not gonna do the music videos, because if I try anything from Vivo, they'll block me and my whole channel will be banned. Them money-hungry bastards. Anyway, back to the CMA Awards. Male Vocalist of the Year, Vince Gill. No argument there. Female Vocalist of the Year, Tanya Tucker. That one's a little... She was on her comeback during this time. So I guess, you don't really think of Tanya Tucker when you think of, like, great vocalists. You think of, nothing wrong with the way Tanya Tucker sings, but, her raspy voice, nobody really thinks of it as like, oh, that's like a great voice, but I mean, not that that's a bad voice either. And it really just, it shows her versatility, but, everybody thought she was done, she came out at like 16, I think, with Delta Dawn, and people thought, after a few years that she was done, but she made a pretty big comeback in the early to mid 90s. Vocal Group of the Year, the Kentucky Headhunters. Those guys are funny. You could just picture them doing rock music, but they do, really stone cold country music, with a lot of rock behind it. It was, kind of a little ahead of their time. They didn't last very long as far as, like, on the charts, sadly. Vocal Duo of the Year, the Judds. I believe this is the last year they won it, or the second to last year. This is when they were getting ready, wrapping up, and of course Wynonna Judd would be solo, and I believe the next year or the year after. But also, Brooks and Dunn came on the scene either at the end of this year, no, it was the very next year, I think, with their first album, Brand New Man, and they would win that Duo of the Year award for a decade plus. Single of the Year, Friends in Low Places, and of course, the CMA Awards and some other awards, they have the Single of the Year, and they also have Song of the Year. Single of the Year is more about the song, the song and the artist, and, people listening to it. That's why Friends in Low Places won that. Song of the Year went to When I Call Your Name, and that one goes more to the songwriter, which was Vince Gill and Tim Dubois. Obviously, Vince Gill performed the song. If I had to pick a song of which one I like better, obviously I'm going to pick When I Call Your Name. People probably think I'd pick Friends in Low Places. Not that it's like it's, a novelty. It is a novelty song, I guess, but still I like Friends in Low Places. I've never really gotten tired of it. I know a lot of people did, because it was probably his most popular song of all time. But as far as, like, my wheelhouse of heartbreak country songs that I love, When I Call Your Name is right there near the top. Can't go wrong with that one. The Horizon Award, which is basically like the New Artist Award, went to Travis Tritt, which is kind of weird since he'd come out 2 years before. But he kind of, even though he was one of the class of '89 that I always talk about with Alan Jackson, Clint Black, and Garth Brooks, he kind of gets lost in the shuffle behind him because his stuff was more rock tinged, and Garth Brooks was more mainstream. Same with Clint Black and Alan Jackson as far as, like, more country artists. They all wore hats. Travis Tritt didn't. So I think that's why he was up for the Horizon Award, because, he wasn't getting as recognized earlier. But now that he come out with this Anymore in that album, they're like, we got to recognize this guy. But the other nominees for that award were Mary Chapin Carpenter, more folky type music, but she still had a big year. Mark Chestnut, if Travis Tritt wouldn't have been nominated that year, which I don't think he should have been 2 years into his career, but I'm not going to argue with him getting an award either. But anyway, I think Mark Chestnut would have won that. Doug Stone as well. Oh, God. How about Country Heartbreakers? Better Off on a Pine Box. Whew, that song will break your heart. And then Pam Tillis, daughter of Mel Tillis, but that song, Maybe It Was Memphis, was like huge. Right out of the gate, #1. If she'd had more songs than Travis Tritt definitely won, I believe, based on how many years he'd been there. Even though it's supposed to be for a new artist, it's weird. But the Horizon Award, New Artist of the Year, whatever the award show calls it, they've always been a little weird with that award. I've seen some people win it twice. Like, how can you be New Artist of the Year twice. Like, you can only be new once. Anyway, Musician of the Year was Mark O'Connor. He always seemed to get this award. He was like a fiddle player that played on a lot of big records. He always seemed to be like the Musician of the Year, and it's like, I never even heard of this guy except for award shows, because, like I said, you think when people get awards, it's always the most famous people, but Musician of the Year, obviously there's been times Vince Gill has won that for his guitar work, where he's, obviously an artist, but Mark O'Connor, I believe he's had a couple records, but, he's a fiddle player, so you're not, I don't even believe he sings at all, I don't know. But Music Video of the Year went to Garth Brooks' The Thunder Rolls. I talked about that during the No Fences Tales from the Albums video I did. But definitely a controversial video that got pulled off of CMT and TNN and actually played on MTV just because it featured an abusive husband and him getting shot. Definitely some controversy in there that helped win that award, but it still was really a good video. But we're going to move on now that we're past the hour mark, I'm sorry, to kids' meal toys. Everybody loves those. Of course, most people know the Happy Meal toys, and of course, during the 90s, if it's October, you know what's coming out. The McBoo bags and buckets. Those are the trick-or-treat, the orange pumpkin buckets or the bags, depending on what you got or what your McDonald's had, that you go trick-or-treating with. Of course, we didn't. We ended up having pillowcases because we found out we can get more than that. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. Burger King had Captain Planet flip cars. Of course, everybody remembers Captain Planet and the Planeteers. I love that cartoon. These were little vehicles that you could flip the character over and it'd be like another character. Because a lot of the kids' meal toys, a lot of them ended up being cars and just different things you can do with different cars. Because it's just so easy to make. Wendy's had Silly Sippers. These are a set of masks, like funny faces and stuff, and then you get a straw with it that goes like through a hole in it, and you just drink out of it. Just funny stuff. And then Pizza Hut had a crossover with Disney's Rocketeer movie, which I don't remember. But anyway, they had cups and like these foam glider airplane type things. So that came out with those. It's fun to go back and look at those, and then you find them on eBay, and they're cheaper than you expect. But we're going to move on to our Nickelodeon lineup. I choose a random day out of the month, and I happen to pick October 15th, which is a Tuesday. So we're going to see what was on Nickelodeon on Tuesday. I'm going to go to my site here I got for that. And this was obviously during the school year, so kids would have most likely been in school on this day. Unless you had like fall break, which I don't remember when that is. Or our school didn't have fall break. I know they do around here, and they have for a while now. But I don't know if some schools had it and some didn't. Ours didn't. We had a spring break and a summer break, obviously, and other holidays and stuff like that. The 3 days for Thanksgiving, but we never had a fall break at our school. But anyway, we start off at midnight with surprising, which, by the way, when I do these, I go through the lineup from midnight to midnight, and as you know, Nickelodeon at overnight, as they call that time period, was always Nick at Night, for the older people, because the kids are supposed to be asleep. But a surprise to find here at midnight is Looney Tunes on Nick at Night, which is obviously put there for the older people that have been watching Nicktoons since they were kids, and even since their parents were kids, even. But yeah, it shows that sometimes parents want to watch cartoons. Then we got the Many Loves of Dobie Gillis, the Patty Duke Show, My Three Sons, the Donna Reed Show, America Tonight. Oh, there's a good one at 3. Alfred Hitchcock Presents. Love that. Next month's bonus show is going to be, it's a segue there, almost. It's going to be my top 10 horror anthology movies and top 10 horror anthology shows. And Alfred Hitchcock Presents is definitely one of those shows. I love horror anthology. I freaking love it. Then we've got Dragnet, Adventures of Superman, which I believe had George Reeves, which was Christopher Reeves' dad, originally played Superman. Then we got the Dick Van Dyke Show again, Get Smart, Mr. Ed, the Talking Horse. I loved him in that show. Speaking of animals, next we got we start the Nickelodeon portion of the day with Lassie. Got one called Kids World. I don't remember what that is. I might look that up for next time, but I don't remember a show called Kids World. But at 7, one I do remember that later they would put on at 6 in the morning, but here it was on at 7 in the morning. Mr. Wizard's World. I remember living at Granny's watching this before school. He taught me so much science stuff. Then we got Nickelodeon's Most Wanted, Yogi Bear, which was their version of Yogi Bear. Which is just old Yogi Bear cartoons, but they put the Nickelodeon logo on it, and I believe they had a new intro for it and stuff. But at 8 we got Inspector Gadget. Man, I love that. Danger Mouse. I never watched that a whole lot. Then we've got Lassie again. And then we start Nick Jr. at 9:30, which is of course when the bigger kids are in school, and the preschool kids are either at home or watching this at preschool. Maya the Bee, I've seen that a little bit. Don't have too many memories of it, but I remember watching it a couple times. But Eureka's Castle, I love that freaking show. I watch that all the freaking time. Sharon, Lois, and Bram's The Elephant Show. You probably wouldn't remember that. It's about these 3 children's entertainers and this giant elephant. And if you don't know the show by name, if you're my age, how about Skinnamarink Dinky Dink, Skinnamarink Doo? Remember that one? That's what that came from. I love you. I had to do it. That's where that came from. Next is Fred Penner's Place, sort of in the same vein as the Sharon, Lois, and Bram Elephant Show. And then we got at noon The World of David the Gnome. Man, I love that cartoon. You learn so much from these different cartoons, by the way. It's not just entertainment. You learn so much on Nickelodeon. 12:30, The Adventures of the Little Koala. Not too many memories of it. Same with the Noozles. Then we got Maya the Bee again. The Little Bits, kind of the same. Not too many memories. Jeff's Collie. I don't remember that, but I think I remember seeing a commercial. I believe it was obviously about a dog, but I can't remember, if it was a Lassie type thing. If it was like a scripted TV show or like an informational show with just like dogs in it. I can't remember. But then at 3 we've got Flipper, which is pretty much the ocean version of Lassie. Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. Now the kids during the day get to watch it. Inspector Gadget again. Nickelodeon's Most Wanted, Yogi Bear. And then something called the Nickel O-Zone, which was just a block of time from 5 until the 8 the rest of the day on Nickelodeon, for the kids that come home from school, the older kids even. That's why they had Mork and Mindy on here, which I forget that they had on during Nickelodeon time. Hey Dude, I loved Hey Dude, that freaking show about the Mr. Ernst and the Barnum Ranch. Then we got What Would You Do, hosted by Mark Summers. I've talked about a lot of these before, so I try not to repeat everything, but I also try not to just skip over it, because you might be watching this. This might be the first episode you ever see, because that's the way they're made. You don't have to watch, I got to see number 1. You can start at number 45. I'm just talking about a month and a year from the 90s. Nothing chronological around here. But loved What Would You Do. And then another great game show for kids, Get the Picture. Then we got Danger Mouse again, and then we end with Looney Tunes on Nickelodeon. And then we start Nick at Night again with Mork and Mindy, The Adventures of Superman, Dick Van Dyke Show, Get Smart, Dragnet, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Green Acres. Oh boy. I say that because for months and months, except one day this week, one day it wasn't stuck in my head, but for months, that song will enter my head during the day at some point. Like, nothing will trigger it, it'll just be there. I'll be going, like, ugh. Now it's in my head again. Thank you, Nickelodeon. But then we end with Mr. Ed. Can't go wrong with Mr. Ed. And before we move on talking about these classic lineups, I do want to talk about the TGIF lineup, which is, of course, Friday nights from 8 to 10 on ABC. Their main show was Family Matters. They were in season 3 at this point. The second show was Step by Step. They were still in their first season, and the very first episodes of this, Cody comes to live with the family. Cody, played by Sasha Mitchell, and I'd seen something about him, and I'd had an opinion formed in my head. But then when I read more into it, completely changed my opinion. The reason he left the show, and a lot of people don't talk about him, is because he was actually arrested for domestic violence. And, turns out that he was actually protecting his kids from his wife. She was either mentally unstable or on drugs or both. I can't remember which. But, he actually was protecting his kids and got arrested for domestic violence and ended up getting dropped. He never got... I don't even know if he got charged. He might have originally, but he definitely didn't get convicted or anything. But, a lot of people are like, oh, he's the domestic violence guy. And, I'm definitely the first one to, if somebody's done that, they need to be gone. They don't need to be on any shows anymore. I mean, I don't erase them from history, you could, or their character, but, he didn't need to be on there. But, it was cleared up and they never brought him back, which was, I heard, a Disney call. Once it moved off ABC for the last year, Step by Step, they ended up, I think it was on CBS, they ended up bringing him back for, I think, the last episode or one of the last few episodes. They brought him back. But yeah, Disney wouldn't touch it. They didn't care about the truth. They could have helped resurrect his career, but, Anyway, the third show was Perfect Strangers. They were in season 7, the second to last season. And, of course, Family Matters spun off of Perfect Strangers. And then the last show was Baby Talk. They were in their second and final season. And that's based on characters from the Look Who's Talking movies. Not the exact characters. And, John Travolta and, I can't think of her name. The female actress. I'll think of it later. I don't spend too much time. We've already been over an hour. But I'll think of her later, of course. But it's not their character. It's just basically the same premise of you hear the baby talking. But one last thing to talk about is Halloween. Living with my granny, we lived in a rich neighborhood in Claremont County in Newtown, Ohio. And we got to trick-or-treat. We went trick-or-treat with Travis Tritt, okay? Say that 12 times fast. We got to go trick-or-treat in these rich neighborhoods. And I mean, they were giving out full-size candy bars, multiples of them. We had pillowcases, and they were to the freaking top of those things. I'm not joking. But my favorite Halloween costumes came that year. I was Leonardo, and my brother Josh was Donatello. Travis was like 8 months old, so I don't know what he was, but he was probably, with my mom, but I don't remember if he dressed up. She probably had him dressed up as something. Give me a minute. As I die here. But, yeah, these turtle costumes, they'd be cheap now, it seems like. But they were like these foam things that would cover, head to toe. There would be, a pants and a shirt of, this green material. With, the pants would have, the built-in knee pads like the turtle's head. But then there would be a shell that would go over you, and then a full mask. I love these costumes. They were so much, some of my favorite costumes ever. But, I want to give talk about some Halloween specials that were happening that year, that were on, because, they always have Halloweens. They have a lot more now. They have a ton of Halloween stuff on now. But back then, they didn't have, the ton of stuff they have. But they did have a few specials. Halloween is Grinch Night, which is not new. It was been out since the 70s, but it's the first time I've heard of it because don't remember this. It's like it's a Dr. Seuss thing, obviously Grinch. It's supposed to be like a prequel to to the Grinch. It takes place before the Grinch tried to steal Christmas. The Simpsons did their Treehouse of Horror. This was their second one ever. They just their first one came out in 1990. These were 3 stories that were told from the perspective of Lisa, Bart, and Homer after eating too much Halloween candy after trick-or-treating. So they have these weird, scary dreams, and they, you see it through their eyes. And then Roseanne was definitely known for her Halloween specials on her sitcom. This one was called Trick Me Up, Trick Me Down. It was from season 4, and she's trying to avoid someone getting revenge on her from a prank that she'd played on Halloween last year, and she's looking out for this to happen the whole time. A really great episode. There's something that became known to look forward to every year was the Roseanne Halloween episodes, and of course that would be with the Simpsons too, with the Treehouse of Horror. But the last thing I want to talk about is just my top 5 horror movies that came out that year, and just a personal list. Number 5 is Sometimes They Come Back, which is, of course, based on a Stephen King story. The movie's a little different than the book. I believe the book was a short story. But I've seen that a couple times, and it's still a really good movie. Number 4 is Ernest Scared Stupid, and not because it's near the bottom of the list, so it's bad. It's just, like I said, the other ones are more horror. That's more of a funny one. Number 3 was Silence of the Lambs, and I know once you get done, I tell you the rest of this list, you'll be like, how's Silence of the Lambs not number 1? Only because I didn't see it till much later, and it is a horror movie, I would say, definitely, because Hannibal Lecter is known as one of the horror, one of those horror icons. Maybe not on Jason level, but he's up there. But the fact that it's it's not really a monster movie; it's a psychological type movie. But that's why it's number. Obviously, it's won multiple awards. So I'm not saying artistically it's worse than the other movies. It's just, again, my preferences here. I don't have to give no stupid explanation. Number 2, Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. You're like, oh, you put that above Silence of the Lambs? Yeah, you got problems. I know, not one of the most popular Freddy movies. It was the one that had the last 10 minutes were 3D in the theaters. You put on your glasses in the last 10 minutes. That was kind of dumb, but yeah, it has Freddy's supposed daughter in it and all that stuff. And like I said, definitely not one of the best Freddy movies. It's better than the second Nightmare on Elm Street. And better than The Worst Thing Ever, the remake. Oh, I don't think about that dumb movie. But still on my list is number 2. And number 1 was Child's Play 3. This is Andy's grown up now. Not grown up. He's a teenager. He's in military school. It's funny. He's a teenager. He's like aged like, I don't even know how much, like 8 years or something. And it's only been like a year or two since Child's Play 2. You gotta kind of just like look at it as it being in the future. There goes my dogs. But anyway, Child's Play 3 is a great movie. Chucky gets even funnier than normal. I was about to say it's better than Bride of Chucky. I think Bride of Chucky is where they started going too out there and weird. Although I do like it, it's just that was my dog farting, not me, believe it or not. My dog Nautica, as I call her, Dewey, farting. She's coming back out. You farted, Nautica, during my podcast. Thank you. That's a bonus episode all to itself. My dog farting. Anyway, the first 3 Chucky movies were the best. My favorite one's Child's Play 2. But anyway, I spent enough time on here talking. Oh, God, it stinks. I'm not even joking. I bet she's going to have to go OUT soon. Now she's trying to chase her own tail or scratch her own butt or something. Wipe her own butt. I swear she freaking is trying to wipe her own butt on the floor now. I should have the camera on her. You want the Nautica farted podcast? Let's see if we can see her down there. Hey, Nautica. Oh, there you are. Anyway, we're going to finish up here. Thank you guys for joining me. It was great to talk about my Grandma Lois and some of the Halloween stuff that happened that year, and just, great memories, obviously sad memories, but, I definitely felt loved by all my grandparents on different levels and different, types of love, it seemed like, but I never felt like any of them just, didn't care about me. I always felt loved, and hope I can do that to my grandson. I hope he can, he can always tell he's loved by his grandparents. And hopefully someday, maybe he'll make a podcast and, here's my grandpa and show some clips of me and stuff like that, who knows. Anyway, next time, before I'm out of here, next time we're going to be on episode, I put next episode and I didn't put the number. We're on episode 46 now, so next time is episode 47. We're going to November of 1998. It's our 7th trip through 1998, so we're getting close to the end of that year. I was 14 at this time in 8th grade, getting towards the end of living in Norwood, and for a little while remembering tried to talk about some of my friends there. Like things are getting really bad and getting ready to leave. My dogs are telling me to get off here. We'll talk about next week. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time. Steve's from
Tales from the 90's never die. In our hearts they testify. VCRs and mixtape spins, where every tale begins. Tales from the crypt, marathons. wrestling wars and morning yawns. Play kickball in the street, man, those days can't be beat. Tales from the 90s never die.
And now, I predict the future. Next week, you'll be in the same time, same place, same station, for another hideous, hateful haul of horror.